It was supposed to be just one night until she woke up and realized he was still holding her. It was supposed to be just a drink. One quiet hour to forget the week. One night to feel like herself again before reality came back for her in the morning. Lena Harper sat alone at the corner of the hotel lounge, fingers wrapped around a glass she hadn't finished in 20 minutes. The city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows glowed in soft gold and blue, beautiful in a way that felt distant, like something meant for other people. People who weren't starting over at 30 in a new city with a past they didn't talk about. She hadn't planned to come here, she especially hadn't planned to stay this long, but going back to her apartment felt worse. The lounge was quiet in that late evening way, low music, scattered conversations, the hum of strangers passing through each other's lives without ever colliding. Lena liked places like this. Anonymous, temporary, no expectations. That's when she noticed him. He wasn't loud, he wasn't trying to be seen. He sat two stools down at the bar, shoulders relaxed, one hand resting around a short glass, his attention fixed on nothing in particular. Dark hair, slightly unkempt, rolled sleeves, calm in a way that made the room feel louder by contrast. He looked settled. Like someone who belonged wherever he was. Lena told herself not to stare. She failed. When he finally turned his head, their eyes met, and instead of the quick, polite glance people usually exchanged, he held her gaze. Not intense, not flirtatious, just steady, curious. Her chest tightened for reasons she didn't understand. She looked away first, annoyed with herself. She wasn't here for this. She didn't want conversation or connection or anything that required effort. She wanted numbness, quiet, forgetting. Long day, a voice asked, low, even, close. She turned, startled, and found him standing beside her table, not invading her space, not leaning in, just there, waiting. She hesitated, then exhaled. Yeah, something like that. He nodded like that was enough. Mind if I sit? She considered saying no. She considered all the reasons she should say no, then she shrugged. It's a free country. A small smile touched his mouth as he took the chair across from her, not smug, not practiced. Real. I'm Ethan, he said. And this is where I usually come when I don't want to think. That surprised her, the honesty, the lack of performance. Lena, she replied, and same. They sat in silence for a moment, and it wasn't awkward, it was comfortable. Like neither of them felt the need to fill the space just to prove something. What are you running from? He asked eventually. She laughed softly. You don't waste time. No, he agreed. Life already does that for us. She studied him then, really looked. There was something in his eyes, something tired maybe or careful, someone who'd learned when to speak and when not to. I'm not running, she said finally. I'm pausing. That sounds worse. Yeah, she admitted, it kind of is. They talked then not about jobs or where they were from, but about smaller things. Why silence felt heavier at night. How starting over sounded romantic until you actually had to do it. The strange relief of being unknown. Lena didn't tell him about the relationship she'd walked away from 6 months ago, the one that had promised forever and delivered disappointment instead. She didn't tell him why she flinched when people asked what she wanted next, and he didn't tell her much either. They kept things light on purpose, safe. Another drink appeared between them at some point, then another hour slipped by unnoticed. I should go, Lena said suddenly, the words sharp with self-preservation. Ethan didn't argue, didn't try to convince her otherwise, he just nodded. Yeah, me too. She stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder, relief and regret tangling in her chest. Well, she said, forcing a smile, this was nice. It was, he said quietly. She turned to leave and stopped when he spoke again. Lena, she looked back. This doesn't have to mean anything, he said, but if you don't want the night to end yet, I'd like that. Her heart skipped not because of desire but because of the gentleness in his voice, the lack of pressure. She should say no, she should go home, sleep alone. Wake up to the safety of predictability. Instead, she asked, are you good at leaving things where they are? He met her gaze, serious now. I won't ask for more than you offer. The honesty hit her harder than any flirtation could have. Okay, she said before she could change her mind. But just tonight. Just tonight, he agreed. They didn't exchange last names, didn't promise anything. They walked side by side through the quiet lobby like two people borrowing time that didn't belong to them. In the elevator, the silence returned, but it was different now. Charged, expectant. This stays simple, Lena said, more to herself than him. Ethan nodded. Simple. And as the doors slid closed and the city disappeared beneath them, Lena told herself one thing she clung to like a rule. This would end in the morning. Lena woke slowly, wrapped in warmth that didn't belong to her bed. Her first thought was confusion. Her second was panic. She didn't open her eyes right away. She stayed very still, listening, breathing deep and steady, close enough that she could feel it against her back. An arm was draped around her waist, heavy and solid, holding her like it had every right to be there. She swallowed. This wasn't a one-night stand posture. This was familiar, protective. Intentional? Her memory rushed back in fragments. The elevator ride, quiet laughter, his hand warm at the small of her back, the way he'd stopped every step of the way to make sure she was still choosing this. No rush, no heat without consent, just closeness that had felt dangerously easy. She should move, she didn't. Ethan stirred behind her, his grip tightening slightly as if even in sleep he registered the absence of distance. His chin dipped toward her shoulder, breath warm against her skin, and then he murmured her name, not sleepy nonsense, not accidental, Lena. Something inside her cracked. She turned slowly, carefully, so she could see him. His eyes were still closed, lashes dark against his skin, hair mussed in a way that made him look younger, less guarded. One hand rested flat against her back like it had memorized the shape of her. This was wrong, this was supposed to be over. She shifted again, trying to ease out of his hold without waking him. He woke instantly, not startled, not confused, just aware. For a moment they stared at each other, the space between them impossibly small. The city light filtered through the curtains, soft and unreal, painting the room in pale gold. Morning, he said quietly. Her voice felt too loud in the stillness. This wasn't part of the plan. His brow creased, not offended, concerned. I didn't mean to, I know, she cut in quickly. I'm not accusing you, she gestured vaguely at their tangled bodies. We fell asleep. He nodded once. Yeah, neither of them moved. His arm was still around her. He didn't pull it away. He didn't tighten it either. He waited. That somehow made it worse. I don't usually do this, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The staying, the waking up like this. Me neither, he admitted. That surprised her. She searched his face, looking for the telltale signs, detachment, smugness, the subtle withdrawal she'd learned to expect. Instead, she saw something else, restraint, as if he were holding himself in place just as carefully as she was. We said one night, she reminded him. We did, he agreed, and if you want to leave right now, I'll move. Still, he didn't. The silence stretched, heavy with what neither of them were saying. I should go, she whispered. Yes, he said softly. She didn't move. Ethan exhaled, slow and controlled. Lena, I don't regret last night, but I won't pretend it didn't mean something just because that makes it easier. Her chest tightened. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Maybe, he said, but it did. That was the problem. She finally sat up, pulling the sheet around herself like armor. The room came into focus, the unmade bed, her clothes folded neatly on the chair, his watch resting on the nightstand. He noticed her looking. I didn't want you to wake up feeling exposed, he said quietly. Something in her expression must have shifted because his jaw tightened like he'd said too much. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. I need to go. He sat up too but kept his distance. Okay, no fight, no plea, no attempt to change her mind. That made leaving harder than staying would have been. She dressed quickly, avoiding his eyes, her emotions tangling in ways she didn't have language for. When she finally turned back toward him, he was leaning against the headboard, hands clasped loosely in front of him, watching her like he was committing the moment to memory. This was a mistake, she said, even though it didn't feel true. If that's what you need to call it, he replied. She hesitated at the door. Ethan, yes. She almost asked his last name, almost asked if she'd see him again, almost asked why this felt different. Instead, she said, "Take care, you too, Lena." She left without looking back, but as the door closed behind her, one thought followed her down the hallway, heavy and undeniable. She hadn't woken up alone, and some part of her hadn't wanted to. Lena told herself it was over. She repeated it like a mantra as she walked back into her apartment, as she showered, as she stood in front of her closet staring at clothes she no longer cared about. One night, a lapse in judgment. A stranger who would fade into memory the way all temporary things did, except he didn't. He followed her into the week in quiet moments, in the pause before sleep, in the way her body still remembered the weight of his arm around her like it belonged there. She hated that part the most, the familiarity that had no right to exist. By Thursday, exhaustion had replaced denial, which was how she found herself sitting in the reception area of Halcyon Group's executive floor, clutching a leather portfolio with hands that refused to steady. "Ms. Harper." She looked up sharply. "Yes, they're ready for you."